right, Bill? How's it going? All right? Okay. No, but I did have someone with me. Yeah. You can hover about or whatever. You have a good journey down? All being rooted up there. Yeah, good idea.
as you're coming out the door? No, you're right. I haven't seen you for ages. Yeah, I'm very sad. Very sad.
it. Welcome, everyone, to the celebration of life and love for the caring, generous, and perfect gentleman that was PHILLIP John GALE, known to you all as Phil, who sadly died on the 21st of February 2023 at Treliske Hospital, aged 75. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an independent celebrant, and I have the heartbreaking honour and indeed privilege of leading the ceremony today here at this wonderful venue, the One for All. It's very clear to see that Phil was a well-loved and respected man. He would be incredibly proud and no doubt a little bashful at the turnout today. And I'd like to take this opportunity to not only welcoming everyone here at the community centre, but those who are joining us online today too, especially Phil's mother, Stella, and his sister-in-law, Jane. By the magic of technology, regardless of where you are in the world, we're able to be together at the same time to bid farewell to this wonderful man. I personally never met Phil. I wish I had. From all I have heard and been told about him, he was an incredible man. And I know that everyone in this room is proud to have known him and had him in their lives. He had such an impressionable personality, and anyone that met him would certainly never forget him. If Phil were able to do this part himself, he would be thanking all of you for taking the time out of your busy lives to be here today. He would be thanking his amazing, dear friends for all the love, the kindness, the support, and indeed the time that you gave him, especially towards the end of his journey. And he would be thanking the marvellous staff at the Phoenix ward at Treliske Hospital for the compassion and care that they showed him. I know that however unfair and lost and lonely this time may feel, it's always such a comfort to be together and to hold each other in our grief, just as Phil would have wanted. I would personally like to thank two very special ladies. They didn't want me to mention them, but I will. And that is our wonderful Karen and Beth. And without them, I wouldn't have been able to put this ceremony together today. So I would like to thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know there is a retiring collection for the RSPCA Cornwall branch and Community Heart, a local group that Phil supported. And you are all warmly invited to remain here at the One for All after the ceremony, where many more magical moments of Phil will be shared between you all. And that's a really important part of today, sharing the special times that you had with him. I don't think we realise how special certain moments are until we're asked to look back and reminisce, and then do we recognise that those certain events and experiences and times together really meant something, a lot more unique perhaps than they felt at the time. None of us know when our final day will come, and we all hope that we get to do all the things we want to see and do and wish in our lifetimes. It's not until after a person's life has ended that we truly appreciate all the things that they managed to achieve and provide over the years. Being a clockmaker, I imagine Phil was always conscious of time and how important it was to spend his time wisely and freely. He gave so much of his time to others, volunteering at the Bodmin Rotary Club, the museums, as well as many other groups and establishments. I received a letter of condolence that Karen kindly shared with me from the Mayor of Bodmin, Phil Cooper, who's here today. Hi, Phil. He put Phil gave selflessly of his time and energy, not just and organised, supported and worked closely with the staff and councillors at the council, and was considered a genuine and kind friend to many here. He will be sadly missed. It's remarkable just how much he achieved in his own lifetime. I'd like to read a poem to you which investigates the meaning of time, and it's that little dash that we have between the date of birth and the date of death. That tiny little line between those dates on the front of Phil's order of service represents so much, and therefore I'd like to share this poem with you now so that you know exactly what I mean. It's called The Dash by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noticed that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a short while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you live your dash? I hope that while you were listening to the words of that poem, you could really imagine Phil's voice reading it to you, perhaps as a little reminder from him that it's not too late for us to think about our own dash and how there's always time to see and do all the things we wish for in our own lifetime. I found comfort in believing that a life well lived can be compared to a really great book, with each action and interaction, adventure, triumph, sacrifice, we add new sentences and paragraphs and chapters to the story of our life. And as with any book, we cannot completely appreciate the meaning until the final page is written and the final page is turned. It's then that we see the full story and we feel its effect on us. And these are feelings or images that stay with us. And often after Phil's book has been carefully placed on that shelf, it doesn't mean that we've forgotten about him. It just means that we have taken the best parts of his story with us in our everyday lives. Sadly, we cannot prevent that final page of someone's life from turning, and nor can we change the ending. But what we can do is consider the complete book of Phil's life, what effect it had on us, and what part of his book will remain in our library, in our hearts, forever. Phil lived for 75 years, and my goodness, he filled his book with pages and pages of adventures, many of them with his darling wife, Sally. And for that, we must all be truly grateful, and I'm sure you all are. The opening of Phil's life and his chapter starts in Guildford, London, on the 11th of October 1947, when he entered the world to Stella and Cliff Gale. A couple of years later, Raymond completed the family. Phil went to Northmead Primary School and then on to the C of E, school called Bishop Raindorp. Phil was 16 years old when he met the love of his life, Sally, aged 14 at Merrow Youth Club on the 7th of March 1964. Now, if we think of that date, it is exactly 59 years today that Sally and Phil met. As Sally was young when they met, Sally's dad was a bit cautious about the relationship, as any dad would be. So before Phil could drive Sally out without her dad knowing, they would go on little coach trips together. They would be the youngest ones seated on that coach, the majority of the passengers being a bit older, but they didn't care. They got to spend quality time together and made so many memories on those trips. Phil went to Richmond College, a further education, to study horology, and he trained at Stevens Clockmaker in Guildford. Phil and Sally married on the 23rd of October 1971 at St John's Church, Merrow, with the reception being held at Langley, a big house where Sally's mum was a housekeeper. Whilst on holiday in Cornwall, Phil saw an advert for Flan Microwave, which made instruments that went into satellites. He called into that factory, showed an interest, and was offered the job. Knowing that they wouldn't be able to get a property in Guildford, Phil accepted the job, and they got a council flat in Bodmin. A little football pause win gave Phil and Sally a step onto the property ladder, and they bought a property in Anstallen, and immediately they both became involved in the local community. They went on to buy a property, a project that was going to last quite a while, rebuilding a little cottage. Plenty of blood, sweat and tears from them both went into that build. On leaving Flan Microwave, he then worked at Foy in Galbraith's Clockmakers before going out alone, self-employed. After talking to some of Phil's and Sally's friends, it seemed that wherever they both went, they made friends. Many of them stayed friends for life, and at any gathering, they were the life and soul. They always had a story to tell. They could make people laugh without trying, and they lit up every room they entered. They were a remarkable couple, and it was clear that they were both very proud of each other's achievements, especially when Phil obtained the Freedom of London Award on the 6th of October 2000. Now, I'm going to pause at this chapter of Phil's life, and I'm going to ask his wonderful friend George to please continue and share his tribute with us.
I'll try and follow that. Gosh, well, what a lot of people. No surprise there. 5 years ago, or nearly 5 years ago, I stood here or somewhere nearby, and at Phil's request gave a eulogy for his beloved Sally, who had died so suddenly and unexpectedly. Little did I or any of us imagine that Phil, after such a short time, would leave us too. I choked up then, and I may do so again, because I'm not good at giving speeches in front of an audience or congregation. And nor was Phil, really. He was not a speechifier, but he was a great speaker. He could deliver an absorbing lecture to an audience, big or small, on the subject of horology, which he knew in intimate detail from the depths of his very being. And he was, as many will testify, a great talker, and he could do so at length. I was fortunate in that he took me on as a sort of 9-to-5 Saturday apprentice when I was learning clockmaking. Like most teachers of a few generations ago in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, Phil did not need a lesson plan. You learnt as much, if not more, from his digressions and anecdotes as from what he first had in mind to tell you. After chatting over breakfast, we would go to his workshop at about 10 o'clock in the morning. Then he would talk until gone 4 in the afternoon, when he would say, "Well, I had better show you how to do something, I suppose." And in the 10 minutes before I had to leave for home, he would demonstrate something that now, 20 years later, still takes me all day and 3 goes to do successfully. He really was an absolute master of his craft. And although in recent years he narrowed his field of work to mostly high-end jobs, his craftsmanship and encyclopedic knowledge covered all aspects of horology and allied areas, from watches to tower clocks, from the mass-produced to the most valuable and precious inherited objects, or those sought or owned by collectors and museums. He was, I think, one of only very few, less than perhaps a handful of people, in the whole world who could overhaul singing bird boxes, including refeathering the tiny birds. And for that work, he had clients from all over the world. Phil was utterly confident in his skills. He clearly had a rare gift and a native ability, in which fertile ground his skills grew rapidly with the experience acquired from the various places where he worked, from the Remy in his early days, through various clockwork shops to Flan Microwave when he first moved to his beloved and adopted hometown of Bodmin. But they were skills he was happy to share and desperate to teach and pass on. And I, for one, should be ever grateful for everything he taught me and for all his support and encouragement. He was a great teacher and a great friend. Horology was not his only interest, of course, as many of you know. As a kid, like many of his generation, he was a train spotter, and he loved steam engines and any aspect of heavy engineering, but also the fine arts and history in general, and of Bodmin in particular, with his long involvement with the museum here, and almost anything concerning the skills, history and traditions of Old England. Phil's other admirable characteristics were his optimism and positive outlook, his cheery nature, his generosity of time and know-how, and his willingness to get involved both in local and in national affairs. One of his mottos was Carpe Diem, and seize the day he did, usually with both hands. And he was a kind and considerate man, never forgetting to call, visit or write to the bereaved partners of friends and colleagues who had passed away. And there have been quite a few of those in recent years. And he often went to Guildford to visit his dear mum, Stella, or have her down to stay here. But the main love of his life was, of course, Sally. Phil and Sally were exemplars of how it should be done. So many couples seem to grow apart after a lifetime, but Phil and Sally, since being childhood sweethearts, seem to feel that same childlike, innocent and beautiful love for each other all their lives. I only knew them in later years, later decades even, but I was always deeply touched whenever I came down to house sit for them to see little post-it notes they had left around for each other with hearts and kisses and simple words of love written on them. If there is a heaven where souls go to at the end, to another dimension, and I hope there is, they deserve to be together again, and I hope they are.
Thank you so much, George, for sharing those wonderful words. And it's always the jewel in the crown when a tribute is written and spoken from the heart from someone who truly knew them. Phil would be very proud. We're going to listen to a piece of music now. Please don't panic. This piece is not another one of Phil's favourite dance tracks, not just yet, but instead, he himself has chosen a tranquil track in order for you to all bring to the front of your minds the great memories that you have of him. What a stunning piece of music, very happy piece of music, and I'm sure he would like to see some smiles on your faces today. Good choice, Phil. We come now to the part where we will let go of Phil, but we will always continue to hold him close in our hearts and memories, and his generous spirit will continue to surround us in all we do for the rest of our lives. At the end of this ceremony, Phil will be taken to Pentiddy for a private natural burial, and those attending look forward to returning to you all here to continue celebrating his life. I'd like to start by reading another short poem by Robert H. Smith, and it's called The Clock of Life. The clock of life is wound but once, and no man has the power to tell just where the hands will stop at late or early hour. To lose one's wealth is sad indeed. To lose one's health is more. To lose one's soul is such a loss as no man can restore. The present only is our own. Live, love, toil with a will. Place no faith in tomorrow, for the clock may then be still. Please, if you're able and you wish, can you stand for the words of committal? It is with such sadness we say our final goodbye to you, Phil. But we must thank you so much for every little gift you have contributed to this life and the lives of others. As we bid you farewell, we are thankful to you to have shared the joy in the sun, shelter in the storms, and to have laughed in the same moment. We will treasure the memory of your wise words and skill as a clockmaker, your generous character and quality as a person, and will be forever enriched in having known your cheerful face. And so, your kind and caring nature we commit to our memories. Your love, humour and friendship we commit to our hearts. Your body we commit to its end with nature. Thank you for all that you were and all that you gave. Love and light to you on this your final journey, and may you now forever rest in peace with the certain knowledge that you were, are, and will always be dearly loved and terribly missed. Please sit. Let's take a moment to breathe and hold each other in our grief, but also find some relief knowing that Phil is now resting in eternal peace and loved by you all still, and that will never change. A person lives for as long as they are carried in the heart of others, and what the heart has once known, it will never forget. We all have different beliefs in what happens to us when we die and where our spirit goes when it finally leaves our body. I remember being in a religious service once, and the lovely vicar said to me, "They're more than often asked, why do you believe in a heaven?" And every time they gave the same answer: hope. There's always hope that there is something more. So this leads me into sharing with you a final reading. Any Radio 2 lovers might have heard it before, but it's a very short story that won the 500 words competition on Radio 2. It was written by a 9-year-old called Lenny T, and knowing Phil's connection with the youth of today and how much time he spent with youngsters and children, I thought he might appreciate it. I think it's wonderful, and I hope you do too. It's called The Old Rabbit. Pat, was a rabbit, and he was very sad. He was very old, his fur was grey on his paws and around his mouth, and his bones were aching. His baby rabbits had all grown up and moved away and had bunnies of their own. His mum and dad had died many years ago, and he missed talking to them most of the time, and he missed, most of all, his lovely wife Pearl, all of the time. Pat was also fed up of running from the mean farmer who was always chasing him with his gun, and he never dug any more holes anymore and only ate the carrots that were easy to dig up these days. Today it was raining and grey, the sky was black and the grass was muddy and wet, and it was really windy and cold. So Pat decided to hide in the barn until the rain had stopped before he went looking out for carrots. As Pat dried off from the rain, he drifted off to sleep. Pat woke up feeling very warm. He could see the bright sunshine coming through the walls of the barn, and he could hear the rabbits chilly chatting coming from outside. Pat started to creep outside. His bones felt light, and he noticed the fur on his paws was a lovely brown colour like they used to be. Pat's bones didn't ache and he didn't feel sad, but he didn't know why. Outside, he noticed the grass was so green it didn't look real. It almost sparkled. It was soft, like it felt like he was walking on green clouds. And there were piles of carrots everywhere with no mud on them. He wouldn't even have to dig them up or wash them. He then saw a little way out under the tree that there was a group of about 50 rabbits, all whispering and smiling and watching him. Suddenly he saw a beautiful lady rabbit step forward and walk towards him with her arms open and crying. Pat gasped and nearly swallowed his little rabbit tongue. It was Pearl. He ran to her and he kissed her all over her face, and he cried and he said to Pearl, "I have missed you so much, my love." And she cuddled him so tight and whispered in his ear, "I have been waiting a long time for you, Pat." He then realised that he recognised the shapes and the voices of the rabbits standing nearby, all watching him and smiling. It was his mum and dad, his aunties, his uncles, and even his nan and granddad. He looked at Pearl dazed, and she smiled and said, "They have been waiting too." Pat was so happy but so confused as he cried with happiness into Pearl's fur. He whispered, "Pearl, I am so happy. I feel like I am in heaven." To which Pearl replied with a smile, "My wonderful, beautiful Pat, you are." You can see where this is going. And what we truly hope is that Phil and his pride and joy Sally are together, sitting somewhere surrounded by beauty, smiling and sitting in the sunshine, having a great natter about everything and everyone, just like they used to. Picture that image if ever you find yourself questioning why, where, or how, because that would be exactly what they would both want to be in your brains. They would want you to picture them both being reunited, listening to their favourite dance music loudly, laughing and being blissfully happy together. So please can I ask you to stand one final time as I say, farewell to the lovely man with a huge heart who will be missed by the local community and friends immensely. Go softly, lovely man. Please sit.